Welcome to all of you who knew and love Jim Pitt. We have all anticipated this night, this formal naming of the theater, this dedication for more than 2 years. We want to thank Jim Pitt for making this night possible. We want to thank many of you for telling us why in your testimonials that led to this night, and we want to thank you speakers in advance for the variety of things that you will say to remind us of the wonderful person who did so many things to deserve this recognition. I once asked Jim Pitt what his definition of a well-read person was. He looked at me thoughtfully and then replied, "That's a most interesting question." And I looked back, and while he never offered a definition, I realized that the answer stood in front of me, Jim Pitt. Jim grew up in Petaluma and mostly educated himself, reading books like his favorite Lord of the Rings trilogy. Formerly, he attended Petaluma Public Schools and Sonoma State College. Fortunately, informally, he read with passion history and literature, following his own bent. In the early 1970s, Jim began teaching in the old Petaluma School District at Rohnert Park Junior High School. He taught English and history there and took over the drama program. He was also the advisor to the Scholastic Club. Before he moved to Rancho Cotati High in the fall of 1983, he directed many plays at the junior high school. Jim began leading the drama program at the high school immediately. He usually directed at least 2 plays each school year and often coordinated programs with the music department. In 1985, Jim began the first of many years serving as the English department chairman, faced immediately with an entire curriculum change for students of all grades. He led the department in establishing a whole book reading program, a sequential writing program that ran from 9th through 12th grade, a roots, prefix, suffix, etymology, vocabulary program that developed word skills for all students, and a 4-year public speaking program developed by his colleague, Nancy Boxerman-Farrick. As if that were not enough to keep the first-year chair busy for the summer of 1985, he was in charge of ordering and processing thousands, and I mean nearly 50,000 books to be used that fall. Jim had everything up and running when school started. The incredible transition moved smoothly and quickly into all the classrooms. For the next 22 years, Jim led the English department in many ways. Jim continued to direct plays throughout the years, and he helped 2 other English teachers when they wanted to try their hand at directing. And Jim Pitt, an excellent English teacher, taught some of the most challenging courses on the curriculum: Advanced Placement English, literature and the theory of knowledge courses in the International Baccalaureate program. Ahead of his time, Jim always provided safe places for students to gather. He never shied away from discussing issues that were important to students or his colleagues. Eventually, he launched the Gay Straight Alliance, a group that continued after he retired. The best testimonials to Jim's accomplishments come from the students that he served. Laurel, Iona, and I had the pleasure to read many accounts of what Jim did for students from former students. Tonight, the very best details and stories of Jim Pitt will be told by students that he served for over 4 decades. But before we hear your stories, Louis Gansler, the current principal of Rancho Cotati High School and the son of Flora Lee Gansler, the history teacher of many of you, will offer the formal dedication, the naming of the James Pitt Theater.
Good evening. Jim Pitt was a dedicated educator who served this district and this school for decades. He formed the first Gay-Straight Alliance. He pioneered the drama department here. He taught English to many, many students. And he also pushed for a bond to get a theater built. We're standing in it. And so it is a great honor to name it after him. And I have this semi-permanent plaque here. There is another one on its way. It's going to be about 60 pounds, and it's going to be mounted over the door, and it will stand there for a long, long time. And on behalf of the district and the board, two members of whom are representative here, Trustee Michelle Wing and Trustee Joe Cimino, as well as Dr. Myra Perez, Superintendent, who is also with us as well tonight. And this was a long process, and it involved actually two different boards, and we have Jen Wiltermuth also from the previous board as well. Thank you. Jim Pitt had a lot of accomplishments, a lot of contributions to the school, but you don't normally get people this motivated and dedicated to see something that takes this long and see it through unless you have that bond. And that is what is that magical thing that comes from a powerful educator. And I am looking forward to hearing these firsthand accounts of how he impacted so many lives. And so I'd like to welcome to the stage Laurel Iona. All right, good job.
Okay, spoiler alert, I forgot my glasses. Jim wore so many hats for so many people, and his shoes were always impossible to fill. He was sage on the stage, guide on the side, inspirational teacher, generous friend, revered mentor, devoted director, disciplined diplomat, loyal brother, uncle, and son, groundbreaker, lover of music, movies, theater, literature, history, comic books, and Disney road trips. I taught with Jim for decades, and he was a kind, supportive, generous friend to me. His knowledge was vast. From the week of his retirement to just a few weeks before his death, we met monthly for a morning of coffee and chat. Our hours were filled with talk about politics, family, travel, current events, education, theater, and of course, books, books, books. His insights were clear, his sense of justice strong, and his determination to make life richer for all students was quietly courageous. When the plans to name this theater after Jim were first hatched, we kept them a secret, hoping to surprise him with the honor once the matter was settled. And as student testimonials poured in, full of love and gratitude and praise for him and his work, those too we kept secret until this night should materialize. Sadly, Jim died before the final approval came through, and he never knew this plot was even in the works. What would he have said and felt about this theater, a dream of his so long in the making? Josh Mellars, a former student who could not be with us tonight, beautifully articulates the power of this space. He writes, The stage can be a refuge from the world, sometimes a place for reflection, often a place for magic, always a place for imagination. Josh went on to reminisce about the Rancho Theater he remembered. He wrote, "Our stage in those days was inside the musty and well-worn multi-use room. The rows of metal folding chairs for the audience were often set up by Mr. Pitt himself. The school cafeteria refrigerator units were pushed up against the wall on performance nights to make room for the chairs. A few old stage lights were strung from the ceiling. But what our humble stage lacked, Mr. Pitt made up for with his love of theater and his exuberance for us to relish every moment. When I close my eyes, I can see Mr. Pitt clearly now, blocking out a scene on the first day of rehearsal, script folded in hand with a mischievous smile on his face. Mr. Pitt saw all of his students, and he knew how to make everyone else see us, always in the best light. I have a feeling the stage lights will be glowing brightly for a long, long time in the James Pitt Theater." Along with those words from Josh, tonight you will hear more from those who benefited most from both his lion heart and his formidable mind, his students. And hopefully, in some cosmic way, Jim will finally hear them too. Thank you. I'd like to welcome to the stage Bob Portlock.
Thank you. And you can also go down.
Can you hear me okay? Deus ex machina, proscenium, downstage, upstaged. All the world's a stage and we but players in it. Theater and theater, their differences in spelling and reasons why. These all were possible words one could encounter in conversation with the omnipresent educator in the lives of so many of his students. A quick math check tells me the Pitt man directly influenced over 10,000 students during his lifetime. These are only some of the highlights, glimpses of his greatness being hinted at here tonight. The James Pitt I remember at Runner Park Junior High in 1976 to 1982 and beyond cannot be distilled in these few words, but this man's spirit immediately evokes for me knowledge, acting, and unstinting tenacity to excel at anything that can be achieved through study, practice, and open-eyed courage. Jim's theater career perhaps began with the singing in choir alongside his ever-close cousin, Kenneth Wayne Wordy. And in the late 1960s, Jim performed on the Petaluma Limelighters stage for the Music Man and Oklahoma musicals, and other hits alongside the parents of a future student and actor, Stephen Hartman. Those were very close community in those days. Jim went on to direct 2 seasonal comedy or drama productions every academic year. My own first Jim Pitt show was The Primetime Crime, often with the assistance of Christy Smith as stage manager or our adored muse, Ann Pantea. Our ongoing cast and crew performed Arsenic and Old Lace, Charlie's Aunt, The Mousetrap, and so many more. People like Cole Walker stands out as a remarkable acting talent from womb to tomb. Lisa Miranda and Jacqueline Harris from those early years, sisters. also deserve honorable mention as stars in Jim's growing constellation. There are so many more. Dennis Wilkes, David Lovato, Scott Smith. I could go on and on and on. Jim taught us the history of theater, spelled with the R-E suffix, starting with the ancient Greeks and all the way past Broadway and West End to off-Broadway, avant-garde, comedy, improv, mime, film. Sometimes famous, sometimes unheard of plays or musicals, movies dealing with social issues, politics, and discussions of things that matter, no matter the controversy. As if these teaching opportunities weren't enough for this man, he found time every year to direct one more play over the summer. He pioneered the establishing of the Runner Park Spotlight Players, not RP's first, but certainly a significant push in early Runner Park's theater community, giving student actors firsthand experience at engaging local business in fundraising projects to support their art. Not just theater, art history, art as literature, comic book art as literature. Mr. Pitt was an early proponent of bringing graphic novels into his remedial reading classes, demonstrating breakthroughs in the reading lives of so many of his students who might be struggling to read, but whose imaginations could run wild with the confidence he could instill with his methods. How all these things mesh if we allow enough time for them to percolate insightful connections in our minds. Jim taught these things. Jim led extracurricular clubs like the Mentally Gifted Minors Program, California Junior Scholarship Foundation. He was continuously leading student field trips to local and Bay Area plays and concerts, cultural events, all the museums and historical sites, from Fort Ross on the northern coast to the Winchester Mystery House in San Jose, the DeYoung Museum, the Exploratorium, Golden Gate Park, Asian Art Museum, African Art and History, Oakland, Berkeley. There are too many field trips like this to list here. This was just junior high, mind you. To many of us, Jim Pitt was a jolly Falstaff, Duncan, Idaho, Gurney Halleck, Gandalf the Grey, all jelly rolled into one. His ideas opened doors in our young minds and broke the ice of young insecurities yearning to be free. He was Socrates, espoused Platonic philosophy, John Locke, Thomas Paine, common sense. James Baldwin was one of his favorite authors. Herbert Woodward Martin, Judy Grahn, Doris Lessing. Not only the variegated Bob Dylan, but big words too. One learned to place multiple dictionaries around at hand to memorize, with Jim refusing to ever just tell the meaning of words like consilience, blandishment, or secularity, or the origin of consciousness and the breakdown of the bicameral mind. And always at center, the music of the Moody Blues, a question of balance. The rule of law and revolution, and always a question of balance. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Rancho Cotati.
All right, so I'm Jill Kaufman, back at Rancho, Jill Shack today. And I am old enough, you see I'm up at the top of the list, that I have to wear my glasses to see my paper, but I won't be able to see you, so don't be offended if I'm looking down. Okay. Good evening. My name is Jill Shack, and I am the drama teacher at Lawrence Jones Middle School. My entire training to be a theater director came from participating in Jim's plays. Now I see the challenges he must have faced, searching for the perfect play for his actors and audience, building scenes and acquiring props to bring the performance alive, and constantly looking for the funds to make it all happen. He also had the extra hassle of performing in an MU. But Mr. Pitt was a typical teacher in that he never let his students know the difficulties he was dealing with behind the scenes. He never gave up on drama, making do, and making magic. What Mr. Pitt did let his actors know was that theater was important, not only because of the confidence it instilled in us, but in the messages and themes we could share with the audience under the guise of entertainment. He challenged us to understand viewpoints alien to us and to look beyond our Rohnert Park reality. And then, when he found out we wanted to try a musical, he said, "Go ahead," and he directed Hello, Dolly. I think that we can agree that we are all here because Jim helped us find our place in school. Drama attracts all types of people, and many are looking for a place to fit in. Mr. Pitt, with his big smile, choice of plays, and the space he created at rehearsals, made sure all involved felt safe and important. I remember being cast in The Mousetrap in 7th grade and feeling like I won an Academy Award. And while junior high was difficult, I knew I was an actor and nothing else mattered. The funny part about this is I'm actually very, very bad at it, and I always have been. But Mr. Pitt never let on. He gave me a place to be for as long as I needed it. I see with my own students how quiet, unassuming kids can thrive and grow within a nurturing theater department. Kids who have an opportunity to shine and connect with others in a space that may not exist if Mr. Pitt had not shown me what was possible as a director and a teacher. He was what all teachers aspire to be, an agent of change that far surpassed his tenure. And I'm so thankful he will be remembered. And now I'd like to introduce Dan Brown.
Hi, everybody. My name is Dan Brown. I'm from the mighty class of 1987. Go Cougars. I am a sports writer for The Athletic, but back in 1986, I was a terrible actor. And in 1986, I did not know I was a terrible actor. And here's how I found out. It was about a week before our production of Charlie's Aunt, and Mr. Pitt pulled me aside and said, "Hey, I want to tell you, you're really growing into that role. You're really kind of settling into that role." So far, so good. And then he added, "For a while there, I wasn't sure where you were going with all that." It took me a while to realize just how remarkable that conversation was, and it's remarkable for what Mr. Pitt did not do. He knew I was struggling, but he never said so. He understood that if he had said so, it would have undermined whatever shred of confidence I had at 16 years old. He could have also said, "Do it this way," or "Do it that way." But at some point, he made the conscious decision to let me find my own way. And that, even now, means as much to me as anything any teacher or professor or boss or editor has ever done for me. That same production, that Charlie's Aunt, we did have a good actor, Chris Stuckey, my friend Chris Stuckey. I saw him not long, and he was recently on Jeopardy, by the way. Nice aside. He was out visiting from Chicago, and we talked about Mr. Pitt. And this is what he said. He said, "I feel like Mr. Pitt hit the perfect balance between authority over us as a teacher and empathy towards us as students. The feeling among all of us was, this guy gets me in a way other teachers do not. See? That's why the Chris was the star. Let's see. This theater is a monument to somebody who taught differently. Mr. Pitt taught differently. He might even have taught differently from student to student, modifying what he had to say, understanding them in a way that other people didn't. I actually had Mr. Pitt, like a lot of you, for the first time in 8th grade when he was still at Rohnert Park Junior High. And it was different there, too, because he had us perform this, and this is for the public, mind you, an experimental play called David and Lisa, which had been a 1963 movie, and then briefly an adapted play that had a short run in 1967. Let me remind you that we were 8th graders, because this is the actual description of the play from the IMDb. Teenager David Clemens develops a hysterical fear that he will die if he comes into physical contact with another person. Perturbed, David's overbearing mother places him in a home for mentally disturbed young people. So gather around, kids. Not only that, but it was not a traditional 3-act play where the curtain would come down between acts. My memory is that there were 31 very short scenes, and he would just flick the lights off in between to demonstrate or signal that it was time for a different scene. Now, I warned you at the beginning that I'm a terrible actor, but I'm going to reenact an entire scene right now while handling both parts. You're welcome. Now, when we did this in 1982, the part of David was played by my best friend, David Fenniger, and I called him yesterday to make sure I had the right lines, and it did not take us long to sort this out. So here's this play right now. Knock, knock, knock. Who is it? It's Alan. May I come in? No, I'm busy. Okay, I'll try again some other time. Scene. Now, what was Mr. Pitt trying to teach us with this weird 1960s play? I don't know. But I love him for doing it because I suspect what he was teaching us is that art comes in many forms. It doesn't have to be 3 acts. As my friend Chris said, for many of us, Mr. Pitt was our gateway to the arts. For a lot of you in here, he was our gateway to the arts. And he knew that artistic expression could be as weird, as quirky, as dark, and as human as we were. One last story, because it's my favorite memory of Mr. Pitt, both as a teacher and as a man. In that production of Charlie's Aunt, there was a day of rehearsal where Chris had to leave early. And there's a scene, if you know the play, where Charlie's aunt, who's a man dressed as a woman, goes running through the audience, and it's pure physical comedy. So when Chris left, Mr. Pitt filled that role. And again, it's remarkable what Mr. Pitt didn't do. Because he could have just read the lines, and he could have just stood where we were supposed to stand and kind of gone through the motions. Instead, he inhabited the role. He performed as if it were a packed house. He gave perfect over-the-top delivery of every line, and we were all howling with laughter. And when it was time for him to run through the audience, he gave it everything, and it was hilarious. For one thing, I'd never seen Mr. Pitt happier. For another, it was the greatest acting lesson I've ever seen. It was as if we all said, "Oh, this is a farce. The humor comes when you commit 100%. It comes when you're fearless and you're joyful and you're passionate. This is what elevates lines on the page to something that's unforgettable." And now, tonight, I think the same thing about this building, the James Pitt Theater. This is what it looks like when you love your craft. Here's to Mr. Pitt, and may this building forever provide a gateway to the arts. Thank you. Up next is Emily Meyerding.
So I'm relieved that everybody else is referring to Mr. Pitt as Mr. Pitt, because if I was going to have to try Jim, I was not going to pull it off. So it's an honor and it's a privilege to be here today. I'm Emily Meyerding, class of 96. Had the opportunity when I was a student at Rancho to take Mr. Pitt's classes in British literature and AP English literature, and of course theater. Without a doubt, over about a quarter century worth of school, he's the teacher that influenced me the most. When I was here, Rancho, as many of you are well aware, didn't have a lot of resources, especially in comparison to private high schools or flagship public high schools. And as a result, when I was in college and I was in graduate school, I often felt underprepared relative to the other people in my classes. But that was never the case in English. Because of Mr. Pitt, in his literature class, we read Dostoevsky, we read Allende, we read Kafka, we read Sartre, we read Mishima, we read Styron, we read Shakespeare, and most importantly, we read The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Because of Mr. Pitt's English class, I was able to understand discussions on topics like existentialism, magical realism, classic Russian literature. And I know this may not seem like a vital skill, but it allowed me to participate in conversations that I otherwise would have been outside of at really important times in my life. And I'll forever be grateful for that. But also, Mr. Pitt's teaching wasn't just aimed at students that were going to go to graduate school eventually. It was clear that he perceived every student as having the capacity and the right to participate in these kinds of conversations. He treated his students with respect, as intelligent, engaged, talented people. And I think they rose to meet his expectations. We read plays aloud in Mr. Pitt's classes, often with him taking parts. People acted out the parts, they discussed the content, they processed the ideas. I remember for one assignment the year before us, students camping out outside of his classroom so they could pick their preferred books, showing up at like 6 in the morning. My sophomore year, Mr. Pitt coordinated trips to San Francisco for members of the drama club to see Angels in America. Through these activities, he opened up new worlds to us. The time and energy that Mr. Pitt devoted to all of this was extraordinary. He held a zero-period drama class, he taught a full day of classes, and he stayed after class to direct plays. My senior year of high school, we did 5 different shows. That means he was here for probably 12 hours a day, every day of the year. He also let us invade his classroom during lunch hour to watch Monty Python and Kids in the Hall sketches, and generally wreak havoc. And he was a pillar of emotional support for many students who were struggling with their sexual identities, their home lives, and other challenges. Many of my memories of Mr. Pitt, of course, revolve around participating in the plays he directed. I absolutely, like many of us, adored drama club, the performances, the preparation, and above all, the sense of community. I also appreciated that many of the plays that we did with Mr. Pitt felt significant, like we were doing something that mattered. Possibly because of our shoestring budget, it felt like we were able to get away with shows that no one else in any other high school would get to perform, like Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, and The Normal Heart. For The Normal Heart, which is about the beginning of the AIDS epidemic, Mr. Pitt invited members of the Sonoma County LGBTQ community to one of the performances. At the time, I was mostly excited to have a larger audience. But looking back, I think it must have been an exceptional experience for these members of the audience to see high school students performing that play in 1994. I'm proud of my participation. I'm even more proud of my classmates that portrayed gay characters, which was extraordinarily brave at that time and place. Mr. Pitt helped us to be brave. He never pushed, he never proselytized, but he provided us with an accepting environment, and through his example, he showed us what it meant to be good people. He supported us, he respected us, I am sure he regularly defended us, and he gave us the courage to defend other people. I have here in my notes, we created an on-campus LGBTQ ally group because, of course, Mr. Pitt would let us see it as us creating it. But he led the creation of this group, did classroom presentations against discrimination. A friend and I wrote a letter to the editor at the Press Democrat criticizing a homophobic school board meeting, not in this district. And I probably would have wanted to do those things without Mr. Pitt, but because of Mr. Pitt, I actually did do them. He helped us to be the people that we wanted to be in high school and afterwards. So to wrap up, as I was preparing my remarks for tonight, I reread Angels in America, which is a play that I indelibly associate with Mr. Pitt. And the line that really jumped out at me this time was actually from the play's production notes. Talking about the staging, the playwright says, quote, "The moments of magic are to be fully realized as bits of wonderful theatrical illusion, which means it's okay if the wires show, and maybe it's better if they do. But the magic should at the same time be thoroughly amazing." And so to sort of return to Josh's earlier comments about the old Rancho Cotati Theater, everyone who has either been in or attended a play there knows that it was not an ideal performance space. Literal hole in the wall of the cafeteria. The wings were small. The stage floor was battered, paint-stained, a little sticky. Light grid was sparse. The green room was a 30 walk outside away from the theater, sometimes in the rain. And acoustics were terrible, and as many of you are all too aware, the chairs were unbelievably uncomfortable. The wires always showed. But despite that, or maybe because of it, the magic was thoroughly amazing. I'd like to thank Mr. Pitt for everything that he's given us. And I'd like to introduce Rick Nelson as the next speaker.
Hey there. It's nice to see so many people, familiar faces, and people from before my time and after here to represent such an amazing man. I have lots to say, but before I do, can we just talk about this stage for a second? It's amazing. I had the honor of getting to watch my daughter do an elementary school play here, and I latched on to be backstage and help out with the set. And if you think this part's amazing, it's even more amazing back here and all that goes into this. So super excited. And just to add on to the fabulous theater that was the MU, I mean, this is almost unfathomable, right? I mean, I remember how we used to put 2 box fans up at each end of the MU to get the cigarette smoke out from the Booster Club bingo nights that happened 45 minutes before showtime. So this is a pretty amazing experience, to say the least. So, okay, so Mr. Pitt. So first of all, he would be unsurprised, but hopefully a little bit bemused that I am not yet off book, and and that I'm probably going to ad-lib a little bit too much. But I hope he would appreciate the thought. So I'm really excited to speak on behalf of what I think is a really incredible man. But while I somewhat speak from my history and memory of the man, I speak for a lot of people today, right? So everyone I know who's ever had an interaction with him or been a part of his theater group are all a community, whether we acted together or not. There's a Facebook group that has really been amazing, where all of the alumni have kind of come together, generations on, just to trade stories and see all these similarities. So again, while I'm here for me and to honor Mr. Pitt, I'm also here for all of us, for all of you and all those guys who couldn't be here. All right. Okay, so at this school, there are some people whose impact made their names larger than life, names that will roam these halls long after their time here. So much so that some of those names associated with them are synonymous with this school itself. Names like Hunt, like Lowry, like Gansler. They will always be legends here, just as it should be. You can't think of sports at this school without thinking of the name Sarlot. You can't think of football. You can't have Rancho baseball here without the name Doherty. You can't have football here without the name Daggett. Wrestling without Hansen. Running without Anderson. P.S. We might think about the track someday, but he'd have to retire at some point, which I don't think will happen. So anyway, they're names that are just intertwined with this school forever. Just like those names that I mentioned should and will always be attached here, so is the name Jim Pitt when it comes to Rancho Theater. Outside of his impact on the theater community, his impact as a teacher and a mentor and a leader already qualify him as a Rancho legend. He was famous for always looking out and protecting an underdog wherever he could find one. He, for as long as I was there, left his classroom open every lunch just to give people a safe place to be. If you were bullied, you had a safe place to go. You just needed a timeout, you had a safe place to go. And I know so many people who have lifelong friendships just because they happened to stop into Mr. Pitt's classroom that day. He, as we mentioned, he sponsored and was the leader of the Gay Straight Alliance for as long as anyone can remember. His impact on theater was equally a legend. Long before I attended this school, I would hear from all the actors that came before me on the impact that he had on them in this ever-growing community of thespians. My take on Jim is a little bit different in that I arrived here as my freshman year in 1989, and Jim Pitt, for health reasons, had just stepped away from the theater program. And we had a fabulous replacement in Marcella Lee, who I also hold dearly in my heart, but we all knew the reputation that Jim Pitt had and what that meant, and we all felt a little bit left out in that we missed it. My senior year, Mr. Pitt took the program back over when Marcella had to step away for her own health reasons, and it was immediately clear why this guy was so beloved. He lit a fire in this amazing group of kids and brought them all together in a way that they'd never had a chance to bond before. And we, beyond just figuring out kind of the acting and how the things that you learn from doing a play together, we got this chance to learn this amazing real superpower that I've heard everybody kind of talk about a bit today. He had this way of pulling all the right strings to have us inspire ourselves and think that we were responsible for creating and putting all this together, not really understanding that the mastermind behind it was Jim Pitt, allowing us to really shine. It was years later when we figured out, when we finally turned the light switch on and realized how big of a role he had in nurturing that in ourselves. We came together as a group. We had something special and we knew it. I'd like to think he knew it too. So much so that when we graduated, none of us were done with it. So we all got together and started our own short-lived, not very famous or successful, but we were in it together anyway, post-graduation theater group, and we recruited Jim to be our director. And he, God bless him for doing it, but he's back in the program. He's got his own set of kids he's nurturing and mentoring. And on the side at nights, he's doing other plays beyond the two that he's doing with us, and helping us get along. And we'd be in that theater. We'd be at the MU. Anytime the high school kids weren't using it, we'd kind of pull it together. Then we'd go to Spreckles when Spreckles was around and do things on the side stage. And I never really put it together until later. He didn't have to do any of that. He didn't have to pull a bunch of kids together that were post-graduation, but it is everything that is Jim Pitt. He didn't get his chance to mentor us and put the skills that we needed into us, and so he did it to make sure we had it. And it's the most, I could not be more thankful for it. So it was a couple years ago when it all kind of came flooding back to me, when I really understood how much Mr. Pitt meant to me. The fact that he took that group of ragtag actors and kind of stuck with us until we all kind of went our separate ways a few years later. I was here, and my daughter was Peter Pan in the Evergreen Elementary School here, doing backstage and watching the play, and his impact just came flooding to me. I look over at my wife, who back then was the stage manager for all of our fabulous productions. And I understood what he did by what he didn't do, right? He had the confidence to let us have the confidence, to let us have ideas, knowing that he'd nudge in the right way. But it was only in this moment, when I've seen it generations past, that I realized what went into him letting us fly. And it's one of the most brave things I could ever think of anyone doing. So anyway, I think tonight, first of all, Jim would have frankly, he would have hated the attention that he's getting right now. Like, he would be so mad. But I think in that story is really the most Jim Pitt thing I can imagine, with his sense of commitment, his ability to make a huge impact on his students' lives without them ever understanding what they were doing. And I think it's excuse me, it's that quality which I love, which is why I know it's that quality why I know he would not have appreciated this moment till after the fact, but also why really no one deserves a moment like this more than Jim Pitt. So cheers to him, and I hope his legacy, I hope everyone who gets to be on this stage from here on out gets to have that same magic that touched us all. So thank you, guys. I'd like to introduce Matt Samuelson.
Hi, everybody. I'm a math teacher here. I graduated class of '96, and after teaching in Vallejo for a while, I actually came back and started teaching here. A little weird. The place looks a lot smaller now as an adult than before. But I became a math teacher because math was easy for me. Math was just something that just kind of came naturally. I didn't have to struggle with it. I didn't always have the best math teachers here. I had some amazing math teachers, but so it's amazing that someone who loves math like I do, I lucked out and had the most amazing English teachers in the subject that I kind of struggled with. Mr. Lowry was one of them, Mrs. Sonnenstein, but I had Mr. Pitt 2 years, and that was incredible. English was a challenge, so I needed a good teacher, and I always got that when I was here. It was his infectious enthusiasm that took a subject that was not natural for me and let me know just how important it was. Even if it wasn't something that was easy for me to access, I knew that this was something of value and something that I needed to learn. So I fell in love learning about the Arthurian legends. Existentialism stands out. Hamlet, that person, when we read Hamlet, he decided, you know, as English teachers do, when you read a play in class, you have someone read each of the different parts. He had me read Hamlet my senior year. Shakespeare's hard to read, and when you give me the biggest part in history, that was, thanks for that. But I love that story in all its various forms, from the Lion King on up. So, so that's, I still remember that today. Drama club, of course. We've heard over and over again about our crummy little MU. The Normal Heart. I was doing plays with Mr. Pitt from 10th grade on, but the Normal Heart was where things really kind of changed in our in the drama club. The Normal Heart, as Emily mentioned earlier, that's where we had an audience. We were used to the year before, when we'd have plays, we'd have, on a good night, 20 people in the audience show up. Great. We were getting over 100 people every night. We had to extend it an extra week. That was the first time we went for 3 weeks with the play. We had 6 different shows. And I think partly, you know, we knew that we were doing something special. I think another part of that was that a lot of the teachers were offering extra credit for everybody to go see the show too, which was awesome. That was great, because all of a sudden we had money and we can put on bigger shows and more amazing plays after that. But that one always has a very near and dear place to everybody that was involved in it. He even took us later on, when the Sebastopol Theater was putting on A Normal Heart, and took our cast to go see that show put on in Sebastopol. And then we got to meet the Sebastopol cast and talk about the roles that we played and what it meant to be a part of it. And so that was also an amazing experience. I was also in The Man Who Came to Dinner. He trusted me with a very big role. Probably the reason he made me read Hamlet, because Mr. Whiteside, so much so that Mr. Lowry, when I first showed up here as a teacher, he's like, Mr. Whiteside, so must have done something. But it gave you confidence. It gives you so many life skills beyond being able to act, to be able to stand up in front of a bunch of people and talk and feel comfortable and confident doing that, to stand in front of my classroom every day, that level of confidence. I was pretty fortunate that I loved comic books too, just like Mr. Pitt. He told me where he picked up his comics, a little shop down in Petaluma, the Comic Book Box. That was great. I started going there regularly, and it turns out there were a lot of other teachers going there. Mr. Boone bought his comics there. Mr. Stenlin bought his comics there. It was the teacher's store, apparently. But for 20 years after graduation, I still got to see Mr. Pitt, once every couple months or so, and we'd run into each other and talk about the latest books. And I got to share that, I'd become a teacher, even before I started working in this district, and he still was a mentor. He would talk about my career choices and the things I needed to look for when I was looking for a good school to work at. He would talk about, just how to be confident in the classroom and to know what I was doing. So that's what I appreciate the most, is he kept being a mentor and kept being a teacher for years and years. Even after you aren't a student anymore, you are still his student. And so I'm very happy that I get to be here and I get to walk by the Jim Pitt Theater every day when I go to work now. So this is pretty amazing. Thank you. And I think Erin Lane is next. Is Erin here? She couldn't come. Okay. Then I'm not sure. What's up? Laurel will come. Okay.